Today we have Libby Clark with us from Cassandra Uncaged Podcast, and I am so glad to have her experience and her wisdom with us as we talk about her journey, and along with that, how self-care, how what was like in her life when she was first younger, and then what it's like now. And you have been married for 41 years, and you have 7 kids, which is amazing. And I feel you have so much wealth to share with us because just those two numbers right there has so much. Why don't you tell me a little bit about like who you were before you got married and share about those early years with your husband?
Yes, I'm so glad to be on the show with you, Christina. And you know what? There's a funny thing. A lot of people mix up because my show is named Cassandra Uncaged. They think my name is Cassandra. But my name is Libby Clark. But anyways, um, yes, yeah, we were married 32 years before we received diagnosis. So my journey with neurodiversity is looks a little bit different than those of your listeners that have had maybe an earlier diagnosis. But nonetheless, I have an incredible story of hope and healing, even when you find out later. So yes, I have my husband Steve is my husband of 41 years now, and I have 7 children. They're age 38 down to 23. And our youngest is still at home with us, finishing up college. And 3 of my children are on the spectrum. And so my life without knowing that we were neurodiverse, it was very interesting. Now, I homeschooled, which I love. I just loved that experience. I loved just being able to see who each of them were as individuals and letting them just develop their what I realize now is, those that were on the spectrum, they had these special interests, and boy, they really had it made because they just had so much fun doing what they were so good at. And so that there was a lot of sweet memories. But I think when we hit the adolescent years, and it was a little challenging, a lot challenging to know what was happening. I think there's a lot of things that they begin to experience that makes it challenging in those years when they're trying to learn how to socially interact more. We were in homeschool groups and all that, but I knew that there was some challenge going on, and but I didn't know what was going on. Plus, the more intense things got, the more stressful it was for my husband, and so challenges in our marriage, and so honestly, I'm not sure I can say that self-care looked real great for myself in the earlier years, other than intuitively doing things that I found joy in. Like I was a runner and I would get up super early and go running, and I would talk to God on those runs. And but it was a very, very challenging journey. Um, and I will share exactly what happened at year 32. I don't know if you have any questions before we get there.
Yeah, so let's like open up the doors to back then, going back around year 5, year 10 of your marriage with Steve. What was your perspective? Like when you mentioned all the challenges, like how did you perceive those challenges when they're happening? Because at this point you did not know about
Right.
any diagnosis. So what was your perspective and your mindset when you began seeing like this is different than what I thought?
Well, I am the eternal optimist, which is good, but it can be exhausting because I was always over functioning. But I always thought, you know what? I'll just we'll get through this, and I would write out my thoughts a lot, and when I would find a good time to talk to my husband, I would share all these things so eloquently, and I would think he'll get it. I really wrote this out well. He'll understand this. And it was so confusing because it for maybe um like less than 24 hours, he would be a little more like, oh, okay, but it never stuck. It was it was very challenging. It was challenging in like we would be at church and I never felt like I could really open up about my challenges because I intuitively understood that we were being perceived as this lovely family. And I remember thinking, I don't think I can really tell anybody what's going on because they're not gonna see it, you know. So that was really challenging.
Understandable. And I think I myself have experienced that as well, where I was shared in the past to our listeners that I'd come in the morning for Bible study and get coffee. And then we'd ask, like, well, how was your morning? And I'm thinking, do I actually honestly answer that question? Because you couldn't even relate to my morning. I mean, not that they didn't have rough mornings, but it was a ongoing every single day. And it was like on over the top. It was like their worst days was like for you and I, are common days. And it's
Yes.
very difficult to trying to build connectivity. So you mentioned that at that point, your self-care, you're thinking like, okay, I'm gonna get up early in the morning. And I can't even imagine how early that would be, but you got up early in the morning and you went running. Now, and you spent time in prayer. Did you see an impact in your life from either not having the time to take care of yourself, or maybe like for many couples, like oftentimes a spouse is supportive and they said, hey, I think you need a break, or how can I do to help you? What was the impact for you having that lack of time or lack of whatever word you want to put in there, like
Yeah.
for your self-care?
Yes. Oh boy, that's a great question because over the years, as happens so often in these situations, I developed autoimmune and I did have issues. But here's the interesting thing. I think so much of autoimmune can be affected by stress. And so when I started to receive healing of my heart, which we can get into more later, I those symptoms have like diminished. I mean, like I don't, I some of them are just gone. So that's good news. That's really hopeful to hear, right? And so, yeah, it really did affect things. And because I ran so much, I had aches and pains that, but I was, you know, so, and I think inflammation, like autoimmune, kind of produces more inflammation. So, yeah, there was definitely ramifications from the stress. Yeah.
Hmm. And so carry us along into a couple years before diagnosis. What was the state of your mind? What was the state of your marriage and of the family?
Yeah. Well, now we're getting into the years where some of the kids are, it's, it's not going well. And my husband, I remember thinking, I developed like these terms that actually now are very helpful to use with my audience. And this is without diagnosis, but I used to think he's like an A and Z parent. A is I tell you what to do, and Z is you accomplish it. I can check it off. But in between, there's B through Y, which is like heart shepherding. And he couldn't do that. He could not do anything that involved understanding and empathy. And so when you've got older kids, you know, in adolescence and all that, it just gets really crazy. So things were pretty intense. And there was, I think, the tool that God used for me, you know, you can look back and you can see the fingerprints of God in your life. And sometimes when you're right in it, you're just kind of like surviving. But I look back and I'm like, oh God, I see your great rescue. So a friend was starting, she was starting to serve in inner city school with a like an after school care program, tutoring kids and stuff. And she needed to hire some helpers. And so she offered me this job that fit my schedule really well. And also, she herself was a homeschool mom. And so she said, you could bring your kids as volunteers and they could, this could be great learning experience for them, great opportunity. And I love that because we could just be together as a family. They can learn all these things about tutoring and all that. And so I did that. And it was the first time where I just kind of got into a different space and was able to talk with, like, my friend herself was going through something hard and she began to open up terms to me, like psychological terms that I had never considered before because I was just so busy surviving. And it just kind of started to open the door to me going, huh. And looking up different terms like, I mean, it started simple with like passive aggressive. And I'm like, oh, I think I see some of that, and all the or narcissism, and gaslighting and all. I'm like, but eventually I found, the term Asperger's back then. That's kind of the term they were using. And it just started to open everything up. The more research I did, I was like, this is it. Which then the big question was, okay, how am I going to tell my husband this, And that's a whole nother story, but it was really like the Esther moment, like going before the king without an invitation and you hope it goes well. But again, the Lord gave me just, he just put stuff in my path. I mean, there was this book called A Very Late Diagnosis of Asperger's. And the guy who wrote it, on the cover of it, he even looked like my husband, So I got that book and I took him out to lunch because I thought, well, if we're out in public, it could go a little smoother. And really, it was God's grace that it went that way. And so he read that book and it was good. He knew right away. His story is that he knew right away, oh my goodness, this is me. But it also put him into kind of a whiteout spin. And for a while, he couldn't even talk for like a whole week. But we got through that. And then he was open to me finding a neuropsychologist. And I found an excellent one. That was another, answer to prayer. And she gave diagnosis and also did family therapy. She was really good. She worked with the kids that were still in the home. And with us, sometimes it was family counseling. Sometimes it was just my husband. Sometimes it was just me. She was teaching me literally how to rework my responses. There was so much that we all had to learn. It was so interesting and it was good, but I mean, I can just tell that little story like so quickly, but it was a big deal. It was like intense getting through all that, but so thankful that we reached that point.
That's amazing. And I want to highlight something that you said, Libby, that I think is very important, is that a friend began talking to you. And even though her difficulty wasn't the exact same as yours, but as she began sharing and being vulnerable and open with someone that she trusted, like you, it had a life-giving impact in your own life. And I
Yes.
think that is a very important key that we, with the right people,
Yeah.
for us to share and for also to be listening. Because in the recent episode, I talked about how we oftentimes don't have other women, and I'm sure you may have the same situation, other women who are like us in our local church or in our local area. That can be very difficult to find. But we can find women who have gone through very difficult and hard circumstances, and oftentimes they can have a heart that can identify with our own pain. And what you're
Yes.
sharing there is a great example. I mean, what if she never would have shared with you these, what would be the situation? I mean, it'd be very different. I mean, obviously God would still lead you, but
Yes.
I think that's just very interesting. Like, in what you're doing in your podcast, again, is sharing with women that openness, that vulnerability, because that does allow the light to shine in and for growth to happen.
Absolutely. Yes. It's like life-giving. When I started to be able to talk with someone in real time about real, like, yes, this is my reality. It was amazing. And that's why I love to talk to women and validate their pain. And, it's like God is, he's El Roy, the God who says, I see you, and to be that for women and to say, I see you, I hear you, I believe you, that's just huge. Yeah.
Mhm. So when you made the connections, you did the research online, you're reading the book, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is it. This is a thing. What did that do for you mentally and emotionally when you made that connection?
Yeah. It kind of felt like I saw myself as like a mama coyote roaming through the fields looking for a den to give birth, only I was giving birth to pain. I remember just being able to safely let out pain, like years of pain, like it made sense. And I actually had permission to grieve, because it's like, oh, this was really something, I'm not going crazy. And so it was, and I think we need to know how to grieve, to curate our grief and to let it out. It's such an important part. And I think that opened up space in my heart for what God was bringing next. Because after we got through the diagnosis and started on therapy, this friend that I had talked about, it's like God kept bringing. Then another lady came who was just kind of in just a tough place with something, and she wanted to just really dig deep. We just kind of formed this beautiful friendship, and we kind of did church in one of the ladies' basements, and we just dug deep, and we were all going after deep inner healing. And it became this beautiful, the timing and everything, because my husband really needed a lot of space to process. Like he just found out answers. It was both completely relieving to him and also kind of shocking. It's like he was 52 years old at the time, and it was like, wow. So he was doing a lot of reading, a lot of just processing, and so it was a really good space for us to, I was kind of just deep diving, and I just let him be. I mean, it was good because we were going to therapy. And so there was a new understanding, and so it was good, but we were like kind of doing more of our own thing on the sidelines, which was amazing. So we went through some amazing courses, these friends and I, and I just began to experience deep inner healing. And it was throughout that year, I was literally changing, and in a way that even my mind-blind husband could notice. And what it did was it shifted the culture in our home. I just had a peace. I was just like, it's like I was just falling in love with Jesus in a whole new way. And I was okay. I was getting all my reciprocity right from Jesus, and the verse he gave me was, those who look to him are radiant, their faces are never covered with shame. And it's like my husband could sense just a peace, because I think what happens a lot in neurodiversity is there's so much, chaos and confusion that, the wife, she's brokenhearted. And I think I think husbands really want to get it right for their wife, but in neurodiversity, they don't, they try and it's not the right thing. And so then it's like they just feel the stress even more. And it just becomes this cycle of like, so like he was seeing that I was just kind of chilling. Like, and he wasn't like ever in the hot seat or anything, you know. And and so after that year was over, the Lord told me, you know what? I think it's time for you to offer him to taste and see some of my goodness in a whole new way. And because I had learned to hear the voice of God in a whole new, deeper way, I trusted that. And I had a new inner peace and confidence that I didn't have to be offended if he said no. I was learning if I used to have this wrong agreement that if we're not okay, I can't be okay. But I was learning, no, I can be okay. I will be okay, even if he's having a hard time. So, anyways, I offered it to him, but he was ready. He said, yeah, I think I'll do that with you. And so he started going through some of the same video teachings that I had been through. And it was just an incredible, they're just excellent series taught by a man who he's not on the spectrum, but he's very left brain. So he teaches very carefully, and it was a good process for my husband. And he started to experience a new opening in his life. And it's just incredible. It's never stopped since then. You know, my husband is just completely different now in a beautiful way. And so part of it, we just feel like the Lord has just been touching him, helping him to grow new neural pathways. I mean, the Lord offers so much hope with the neuroplasticity in our brains. It is so possible to do some rewiring. And he's been going after his own hard work of understanding the parts that got broken, not just from being on the spectrum, but from a life of growing up with the hardships of being on the spectrum, like being bullied at school or having a parent not understand you and treat you harshly. And he's unpacking all of that, going after, he's been in some beautiful therapy times with really qualified men. It's just been amazing. Yeah, so we've both been on this incredible healing journey.
Okay, so for you, what was one of your favorite? You mentioned about just healing and trauma, whether it's for you or what you like to offer other women. What is a great resource for healing that inside trauma? And I think I want to clarify real quick. When we're talking about is either trauma A, where there are things that are or trauma B and trauma A, like basically there's things that are happening to people that are hurtful, intentionally hurtful, or maybe there's neglect that's happening.
Yeah,
And so you're referring to trauma from those, and whether it's intentional or not,
right.
but you're referring to resources that help those hurts from their earlier years. What are some of your favorite ones that you like to highlight or offer to people?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you that earlier, like back in maybe, I'm gonna say, I think around 2020, so it was about 6 years ago, I got some therapy from someone who was just helped me go deep in my spiritual journey. And she just asked me these beautiful questions real simply. And it was so helpful to me. I said, oh, wow, that I feel like there's a process you could put that in. And she wasn't interested in like putting it into a format or anything, but what she did for me was she said, I want you to write down all the tangible things that are really happening in your life. Just write them all down. And then I did that. And she said, okay, now I want you to sort through any wrong agreements that you might have, which are really lies. Sort through those. And then next, I want you to find a scriptural truth that flips that lie around. And then I want you to write that truth on a declaration card and say it out loud until it becomes like a new neural pathway for you. And it was that simple. And it was so life-giving for me that I turned it into what I call FLT. It stands for Facts, Lies, and Truth. And every time I have something where my heart feels burdened, I go through that process. And first I talk to God and I say, here's what's going on. Here's what happened. And it's things that's really are happening. But then I have to sort through and say, okay, is there a wrong agreement that I am holding on to? Things like God won't come through for this. This one's too big for him, or, this will never change, or things like that. And to just flip that around and just declare that truth over. And there's so much power in saying it out loud because we literally voice activate heaven. We pull down, it says faith comes by hearing. So we can hear our own voice say it and increase our faith. But that simple thing has been, so it's like it just keeps me free from clutter in my soul. And there's always something to clean up, right? There's always life smacks you every day. So yeah. And that's the kind of stuff my husband has been doing too. So we're just like, our soul has so much more space. And I love 3rd John 1 2 that says, I pray that you may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. So I have learned this is why I believe my physical autoimmune issues cleared up because my soul was lightened. So it was just amazing.
No, I love that. And there has been research, and I know personally in my own life, the more that we work on our inward working, the lies especially, because I feel that self-care can be completely blocked because of lies. You don't
Yeah.
deserve this. If you were doing a better job as a mom, you wouldn't have these issues, so you don't deserve this time. I mean, all these different lies can really take root, like you said. And I love that process that you shared about working that through with a replacement. Because one of the things I often talk about too is that if we're going to be putting time for self-care, we got to remove something usually. And it can be a physical activity, or it can be like what you're sharing, it's a mindset. Is it
Yeah.
completely a certain way that you saw yourself or saw others? And to change that around can be incredibly powerful and healing.
Yes. One thing that is just so fun to think about is growing a new neural pathway is as simple as thinking a new truth and repeating it every day. Once you start it, you've grown a new neural pathway. And then the more you do it, it becomes your go-to thought rather than the lie. And it's just fun. Yeah.
And also that, and for those who are new to hearing this neural pathway and neuroplasticity, this is something that can happen not only for those who are neurotypical, which is, or allistic, as some people might use that term, but is for those who are also are neurodivergent. The
Yeah.
process may be longer, or the path that is taken to get there might be different, but it is possible. And as you're seeing with your husband, those new neural pathways are possible, but it does take time.
Yes. And it might mean, like I had said before, really doing the deeper work, unpacking some of the deeper wounds. Um, I'll mention, I know this is kind of self-care for the wife, but this is an excellent tip for husbands who would be open to this. He has done work with uh, internal family systems or parts works. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's an excellent, the way it works is you think of as we develop from childhood and wounds happen, we kind of have little parts of us that split off to protect our heart. And we're, a child isn't even aware that it's happening, but and there's little names that they've like, here's the exile, here's the protector, and they're usually come out as angry little parts. But the whole premise of it, because I think these men who have been through so much trauma, especially if they've been, if they're neurodiverse, they are always used to kind of being the bad boy. Like I always mess up. But it's the beautiful story of this is there's no bad parts. You can integrate these little parts and talk to them like, hey, buddy, it's okay. You don't have to protect me anymore because I'm getting better. So why don't you jump on board and be whole? And it's this beautiful it's just so affirming to them. It's so encouraging after years of like confusion and like, oh, I screwed up again. So it's very hopeful.
Oh, that's amazing. What was the name of that again? You said something family.
Yeah, internal family systems. I think Richard
Okay.
Schwartz is the man who authored it. And
Okay.
yeah, yeah, but
Oh,
it's
interesting.
it deals with parts works. And yeah, it's very helpful.
Yes, it sounds very similar to people developing coping skills when
Mm,
they're younger to handle
yes.
difficult situations. And whether it's being like I lie or I blow up, and that's how I deal with these different issues, and realizing
Yeah.
that you don't have to do that anymore as you
Yes.
heal. There's a different way for you to process that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
So, talk about right now where Libby is at. Let's talk about where for you self-care, because now like there's been a complete difference
Hmm.
for you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what does self-care look like right now for you?
Mm. Well, it's interesting. I have always been I think just from all those years I've always been an early riser, but I love to get up and just go down and meet with Jesus. And whether it's doing FLT or just talking with him, hearing his voice, hearing him assure me that he loves me. It's so I keep myself in a position of I get my reciprocity straight from Jesus so that if my husband is having a more stressful time, I don't have to like feel like, oh no, I need it. I need some reciprocity and he can't give it or whatever. You know what? It's like I'm not taking the bait of what the enemy would try and do to, get things all twisted up. So I love to meet with Jesus. I would say soul care is my number one thing. And I still love to go out. I these days I go for a walk. My husband and I both are big exercisers, and we exercise together in the morning. He has earbuds on, and I have earbuds on, and we're kind of like in each other's space, but we know how to avoid each other so we can do our planks and all this. It's actually really fun, and he's listening to his good podcasts, and he listens to great stuff, and I'm listening to mine, and that's all part of self-care. And we both love gardening, and we are looking forward to putting in the garden now. And nature is so healing. So those are all, yeah,
That
all
is that is
things.
great because the struggle I see sometimes is people think self-care and they have this certain image that is certain activities. And really holistically, you were talking about your physical body, you talked a lot about your spiritual health, your mental, emotional health, and even do something with your husband like that exercise. And that's excellent. And how can you tell in the days when you're not able to do your quote unquote normal routine? Can you tell the difference between that?
Yeah, if I have a more stressful stretch, I do feel it. I do feel the drain. It's kind of like my tank hasn't gotten as filled up, you know? And then when you're doing a lot of output and giving, I can't let too much time get between. I've learned, oh my goodness, I just I can't let that happen too often. So, but it's such a I'm thankful that it's so ingrained. I mean, my and you know what, everybody has to do it. I understand we're in a season where we just have one child at home and he's, very responsible. So it's challenging when there's littles, but like I say, even when I had littles, I just got up at oh crazy hour. And I still like to get up early. I do think there is something special about starting those first fruits of the day, I just love that. Yeah.
I agree. And it's been
Yeah.
really helpful just talking about this whole journey that you've gone on and just hearing the comparison of what it was before and now. And what would you say, last question here, talk to the woman who's listening, who maybe she's even crying right now because she's hearing your story and she's like, oh my gosh, Libby's story, I feel like that's me. She's seeing me. What would you say to the woman who feels hopeless and she doesn't know, like, I know I need to take care of myself. I don't know how to even do self-care right now. What would be your tip for her?
Yeah. Well, my first question would be, can you just start simple with maybe starting with like this is literally like what it's like, kind of like growing a new neural pathway. Develop, commit, make it non-optional that you will, maybe if you want to start with 5 minutes a day, but just get up and start to develop a practice of, just I have some freebies on my website that are things that can kind of she could access to start. I even have like an FLT sheet on there. It would just be a very simple way to start, just processing your thoughts, letting out some of your grief, but just starting simple and always be gentle on yourself. It's hard. And, just I think if sometimes it's as simple as, give yourself a hug. Start with giving yourself a hug. I mean, it depends on where some people are in a really rough spot, but you can start. I would definitely go after caring for your soul. And I personally think the FLT sheet is just a real simple way to start. But I just want to say to that person, you can, hope is on the way. You can get healed. You really, really can. If I can, anybody can, but you kind of have to break off any hopes that it's going to come from the horizontal sphere and just kind of let God minister to you. Because I think the thing that, like I said before, it's creating health within you so that I think it changes the culture of the home because the husband can just relax, like, oh, she's okay, and, she's not getting upset, and he might still be doing the same stuff, but you get healthy and whole. And it's a win for you, and it might be a win-win. There's the hope that it could bring influence to your whole environment around you.
Thank you. No, that is great. Now, if people want to find out more information about you, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, CassandraUncaged.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, this is great. Libby, thank you for just being open and sharing your experience, especially, I could hear the long years that you went through and the confusion and finding answers, and that even after all those years, that did not determine what your future was. So thank you so
Right.
much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.